This is the Voice of Early Childhood podcast. Hey everyone, a quick message from me, the founder of the Voice of Early Childhood. I wanted to thank you all for listening and tuning into the podcast. We're always ensuring we provide valuable content for our listeners and viewers as we share diverse voices from across the early childhood community. And we're always encouraging you all to share your voice too. So if you have a specific topic in mind or a guest you'd like to hear from, let us know. Just fill in the contact us form via the link in this episode description. And if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on. This helps us to keep sharing voices and thought-provoking content. Thank you all for being part of the Voice of Early Childhood community.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Voice of Early Childhood podcast in partnership with Male Childcare and Teaching Jobs. My name is Stuart, and I'm your host for this episode. And on this episode, we're going to be discussing a topic that I feel is really important to discuss, and perhaps one that isn't spoken about enough in the early years sector for the early years educators, leaders, and managers. And that is on the sense of belonging and cultivating a sense of belonging and the importance of that. And I am really pleased to be joined by someone who is quite passionate about this subject and has some really good lived experience with that. And that is Ryan. So welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Hi everyone, thank you Stuart, thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm Ryan Bradshaw. I'm currently working for Swift Childcare Apprenticeships and I'm a lead support coach. I've had about 8 years in the sector. Started off as a level 3 practitioner in a toddler room, worked my way up in baby room leader to then being a preschool room leader to being the emotional wellbeing lead for children. So I've got quite a extensive knowledge within the sector, and it's a sector that I adore and that I love so much. And I'm really excited to be diving into the topic around that sense of belonging as well, because I feel like it is something that we don't really talk about enough of within the sector as educators ourselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's great to kind of talk about these different topics and really get people thinking, and hopefully kind of anyone listening or watching can feel comfortable enough to share their own experiences as well. And like you said, we will touch on the subject and the topic of creating a sense of belonging with children and how important it is for young children to have that sense of belonging. But we want to kind of start by talking about cultivating senses of belonging with adults. And it may be something that people take for granted or people just assume that it happens. And I think we both know from different experiences that perhaps me and you have both had, that it doesn't automatically come naturally to you or to a setting. And even if it does come to the setting, what we want to dive, I suppose, deeply into is how you still feel, regardless of how amazing a setting or a workplace or a space will be. Some people will still really struggle feeling that sense of belonging. So I just wondered, maybe perhaps we can start talking about, as a concept, what that sense of belonging means to you.
Yeah, definitely. So like you said, right, we've all probably got different experiences and some of us might have the same experiences, but I think it extends back to, I always think of it about within like our primary school age and our high school age, especially in the high school age, because that's kind of like where those labels and everything kind of come about, and you don't really know your place in the world and you don't really know where you fit in or what you belong to. And so you spend like those years trying to figure out where you belong. And because, well, for me personally, I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't have many experiences with people that kind of were like me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of tried to fit into things that I thought was the right thing for me. So, for example, as I spoke about in an article, I spoke about getting into childcare. It wasn't that it happened naturally. I accidentally fell into it. But originally, I wanted to be an IT teacher.
Okay.
So I did IT throughout college and that, and I enjoyed IT. I did like it, but I didn't quite fit there. And I knew I didn't fit there, but I didn't know anything else. I didn't know what else to do. So I tried to force myself to fit in. And I was like, everyone around me was lovely. And everything that everyone was talking about, and I couldn't get involved in those conversations because it weren't the conversations that I wanted. So I kind of wanted to do childcare, work with I wanted to work with young people. I think that was my goal. Was I wanted to help people. I had this idea that I wanted to change the world, and I was going to do that by helping these people. And so I signed up for my course on childcare, but I backed out at last minute the first time around because I didn't want to be the only boy.
Mm.
And I just thought it's not for me. But it was that sense of, I think it was because I was out of my comfort zone. And I felt like, what if it was right for me? And I just couldn't accept that it wasn't what I wanted to do. I needed to go back into somewhere where I felt safe, shall we say. And I tried back in IT again. It was the same feeling that I kept having. It was like, it just wasn't fulfilling me. It just wasn't here. I didn't fit. I always felt like I was being put into a box. And I tried to force myself into this box. And it was like, no matter what I did, I just didn't fit. And I think the more I tried to fit in, the more I stood out in that sense of where that's where I felt. And then obviously, when I did my level three, I finally put up the courage to do my level three, and I was in the reception class for the first time. It was a really weird but uplifting experience because it was like everything was like I was just like lifted off like my shoulder. Everything was like the weight was lifted, and I felt like I was there and I belonged. I felt it was that sense of like didn't matter who I was, what I did before, right here in this moment, right now, you're here, and we accept you, and we're going to enjoy. You're going to have fun and things like that. And that's kind of like what it was. It was just it was like a playground where I just kind of felt like I was there, and everything I worked for kind of it all kind of like made sense a little bit to me. And I thought, okay. And then obviously these little children came to me and we were having fun, and it didn't matter who I was as a person. What matters was I was there for these children, and I think that's kind of like where we come through like a sense of belonging, in sense of the early years. Actually, in my experience, is quite a very like it celebrates everything, and I get that feeling, and I had that feeling that everyone from different diverse backgrounds come together in this sector, and no one's ever the same. We've all got different experiences, and we all get to share those experiences with children. And I feel like we, as a sector, that's something that we're really good at, and that we do really, really well. It's just championing it a little bit further and shouting it from the rooftops. So that was kind of like my idea of sense belonging, is that I had to try somewhere to fit in, and I searched and searched for a while, and it was a lot of not just like my career professionally, but also personally as well. I went through struggles of not knowing who I was, and those struggles that I had through. I had no one to relate to. I had no one that had been in like when you have like those role models that you can talk to someone that's been through it with you beforehand. No one did that for me. I just had to try and figure it out myself, and I think that's where I kind of got a little bit lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really interesting viewpoint that you've had about, you know, the more that you're forced to kind of sit in spaces constantly that you don't fit into, the more that you're forced to almost stand up a little bit and push yourself out. And you mentioned about going into reception classes and early years spaces, and you felt much more like you belonged. And I suppose it's that psychological safety, isn't it, that you felt? You felt, I'm seen, I'm heard, I feel safe, which is obviously what we all strive for. And I think you spoke about previous spaces and places that you were in, and they welcomed you, and they were lovely, but you didn't feel that was your place. And when I read your article and was doing some research around kind of cultivating that sense of belonging for adults, I came across a really great quote, something along the lines of, the party may be as like welcoming and as fun as possible, but you still might not want to dance at that party because you just don't feel you still belong. You know, they're welcoming you in, they're telling you to relax, they're telling you to enjoy yourself and be yourself, but you don't know what that is, you know, and
Yeah.
that's what, and I think in your article that's what still stood out to me. Whilst you have said you found your place and space within the sector, and you're really starting to embrace that self-confidence and that release those self-limiting beliefs. That's not something you've always been able to do. And you've spoken quite openly about, whilst the earlier spaces have created that sense of belonging for you, you still at times didn't feel like you belonged.
Yeah. So it wasn't till probably about 2 years ago where I finally felt at peace with myself. I was always having
Mm-hmm.
constant battles, um, finding out where I fitted in, and when I did find out where I fitted in, obviously, from a personal journey, was finding out who I was as a person and finding out like self identity. There were so many different things that I could have been like, and I tried to, even down to like fashion, wearing clothes to make sure that I fitted in with different people and the same people. Like I wanted to be like everyone else. And then, like I said before, the more you try and be like somebody else, the more you just stand out and you're like, that's not who you are, and that's okay. But like I said, it was a long time before I kind of, everyone around me accepted me, which was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it was having that self validation, I think,
Mm-hmm.
that thing deep inside you that said, okay, I'm enough. I can do this. This is who you are. Be proud of it, and just really show off like who we are as humans. And for me personally, coming out was a huge thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And no one in my family had ever come out before, so I was the first one. So I didn't know what to do. I had these emotions and feelings in that I didn't know how. I couldn't control them. I didn't know what to do with them, and who to talk to. Like I have a huge support network, but it was that fear of, this is who I am and I need to belong. However, I have a fear of rejection as well. What if
Mm-hmm.
he rejects me? How do I cope with that of rejection, especially from family members? I think that was kind of like you can dip your toe in and just see, like with work and things like that. That was where I worked at the time before I came out. I felt a sense of belonging there, and even though it wasn't in an earlier setting. It was
Mm-hmm.
I used to work on a holiday park. So there was a lot of people that were kind of similar to me and I could relate to people. So I automatically had that sense of belonging there. So I didn't have to say anything to be who I was. I was just naturally who I was. But once I kind of accepted it a little bit, that was when my self-confidence kind of grew and I was talking to more people. But I was always at work then. I didn't want to go back home because I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't be who I wanted to be at home. And it was because I was terrified of being rejected. And when obviously when I told my mum and things like that, she was like, "All right, okay, cool." Like she was fine. So I had all this doubt, and I just breathed. I was like, but deep down, I already knew my mum would be fine with it. It
Mm-hmm.
was just a sense of actually living through it. And obviously, you read things on the
Yeah.
internet, things like that, of people that go through where families disown them and things like that. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I can't do that. So in order for me not to do that, I have to pretend to be someone that I'm not. And that was the
Mm-hmm.
worst part. Was that it was horrible that I had to actually pretend. And I'm not a good actor, which that isn't. But it was it was just a really surreal moment. And then all my family found out, and I love them all to pieces. And they welcomed me. They weren't even about. It wasn't even like a. It didn't change anything, which was
Mm-hmm.
it was amazing because it was like, okay, I can be me now.
Mm-hmm.
I can be me, and this is what me looks like. So I finally had an idea of who I wanted to be as a person.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like when I went into early years. That's kind of like one of my missions is to I want to create a world where whatever I went through and whatever I was feeling at that time, we shouldn't feel like that. We should be able to feel it, but also express it, and also not have a fear of that rejection. That we are creating a safer and braver world for our young people, and especially our young children. And I think that's a beauty of early years as well. Is when we're talking to these children about like diversity and things like that, and they don't see the labels that we put on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Children see children as children, and that's it. With the name, that's it. That's who they see them as. And it's so nice to see. And I think just imagine if the world was a little bit like that all the way through, without the labels and without um, different. Like we all accept that we're all different. We all know we're different, and we just see the person as a name. Um, so one of my goals was to kind of create a space where children can feel that they can express themselves
Mhm.
freely, but also as educators can express ourselves freely as well. And as we all know, children learn. We're with children majority of the time, so they see the world and how we portray it to them. So if we portray the world as this kind, vibrant, everyone's like in like harmony with each other,
Mm.
children will hopefully get that as well, and will hopefully that will feed through into our primary school and our secondary schools. And it was just that was kind of like my whole journey was I was battling with myself, and then obviously then once I got to where I was as happy with who I was as a person,
Mm.
it was like, I need to take that further now. I need to make sure that people know there's spaces for them, and it's okay not to fit into those spaces. It's okay, make your own space basically, and
Yeah.
then own it. That's kind of like the way I've kind of done it for the past, and it was only until like 2 years ago where I kind of felt 100% happy with who I was. And
Mm.
looking back on the journey that I've gone through, it's quite an incredible journey, if I must say
Mm.
myself.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it sounds like it's been exactly that, a journey of self-discovery, acceptance, self-acceptance more than anything. As you said, you know, you had all these kind of scenarios in your head that this was going to happen and this was going to happen, but actually those family members and those friends and those colleagues accepted you and loved you for who you were, even though at the time perhaps you were still coming to terms with that. But I think, from an early years perspective as well, when we're talking about adults who feel psychologically safe in spaces and are able to express themselves in whatever way that is. So, if you're that educator or teacher who loves just singing all the time and being kind of very extroverted and very kind of gregarious, then that's fantastic, and they should be allowed to kind of flourish in spaces like that. Equally, you might have educators and teachers who are very much more introverted in themselves, and the children bring the extrovert out in them, and allowing them to kind of meet them, I suppose, those adults where they are, to help them come along to where you might need them to be in certain situations. And I think, how do you feel that psychological safety from an adult will support the psychological safety of those children? Because I suppose when you're thinking about children who don't feel psychologically safe, typically the first thing to springs to mind is children with SEN, children on the spectrum, who have to constantly mask, don't they? And as lots of the elements that you were talking about, you were almost masking elements of yourself, to fit in with the societal norms of what people felt you should be. So, and we know that still happens with children right from, 2 to 3 years old, right up until 12 or 13 years old. They kind of come home and drop this mask, and it's quite beneficial to them, but also at the same time quite upsetting for them to then have to deal with all these emotions that they've been holding in all day, and these feelings and thoughts. So yeah, going back to the point of adults who feel psychologically safe will be able to support children feeling psychologically safer in spaces. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, totally agree with that kind of that question, that scenario, because I've lived it, I've seen it happen.
Mm.
So, in my previous setting that I worked in, there was a child that has SEND needs, and he was due to transition into the room that I was working in, and people are a bit skeptical as they are because all they've heard is this child does this, and this child's disruptive, and all this that and the other. And me being the person that I was it didn't matter to me
Mm.
what this child had done. It was more to me now what we can do for this child, and being in a space where I know I've created a classroom that every child feels valued, that they feel seen and they feel heard. And that was my kind of ethos throughout, was that it doesn't matter where this child's been or what they've been doing. This is now. We're going to focus on the now. And they came into the classroom, and the initial first thing I did was, because what happens with when you might know this as well, in an earlier setting, you've got an SEND child, everyone kind of runs to them, like they need that sort of guidance in the sort of a way that they feel like they need to be like mothered in a sense, or really that they need that caring and nurturing type thing, which they do. But what I did was I just let this child explore. I let this child into the classroom and freely explore the environment. And I did that. I watched him. I could see them. I could hear them. I can see them. And I just wanted to make sure that it's a brand new room. It's a brand new change for them. And that's the thing with the transition as well, was that they didn't really know me and things like that. So I wanted to introduce myself. So I introduced myself, and I kind of just let them explore. And then I went over just to check in. And then that was when he kind of like introduced me into their place. So what I'm saying is that I kind of like attuned myself into the child. I think I didn't make the child tune into me. I tuned into them. And making sure my environment was correct for this specific child, because they would have let me know if it wasn't. And then as they kind of like sat down and we did a little bits of the routine, this child started following the routine. They started doing things that people told me that they don't do that, they don't do this, they don't do that. And I was like, come and have a look. They sat down at the table. They're using a knife and fork. Do you know, they're waiting and things like that. So it was all like that kind of, I think it was the environment that they felt safe in. And I felt like because I felt safe. And I know what it's like to walk into a room, being a new person when I started to set in, new to the person. I know what everyone's looking at you. Everyone's trying to work you out as a person. And that's kind of like what we kind of do with a child. I felt like, and it was just like, let this child be, and let's be in this moment with them, and figure out who they are, but let them tell us who they are as well. I think that was important, of giving them that freedom. And then ever since then, we had comments from parents like how well they'd done, and how much of a change they had just from a short amount of time. I think it was a month in. And it was so nice to see. And it was then when they started looking at the milestones and things like that, and this child was playing alongside other children. He was introducing children into his play. So it was very much like a moment for like, wow. So to me, that child felt seen, he felt heard, and he felt valued, because he kind of came into his own. And that's like us as adults as well, as when we come into when we in an earlier setting, and we started off in a room that we're probably not quite comfortable in. We want to make sure that we're seen. So are we being greeted? Do we get like a nice hello, a nice welcome from our managers, our room leaders? If we are, then great, because that makes us feel like, okay, people want me here. Like, I'm here, I'm valued, they want my expertise, they want me to ask me questions, things like that. And I always think it's the same for a child as well. So when a child walks into the room, do you welcome them? Do you go, hiya, hi, what have you been up to? How was your last night? How did you sleep well? Did you just check in with them? And you can then see that child will then think, okay, yeah, you're interested. I'm here. I've got a nice warm welcome. If you get people that can't be bothered, and I'm not saying, I know we're all human, and I know not every day we can be this positive, bright thing for ourselves. But we have as adults, have our coping strategies to help regulate and to regulate ourselves. So when we do have down days, we all have down days, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have down days, but we do, and we are trying to support these children, and so we're giving the children that nice positive vibe, makes the children feel seen, and they want to come into the room, they want to be there. And I mean, I've had children that don't want to leave. Do you know? They want to come here and they don't want to leave because they've had so much fun. I think that's what it's all about. It's just having that
Yeah.
fun and really shaping that kind of sense of belonging, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And I think a lot of the stuff that you've been speaking about really positively around creating that safe space
Yeah.
for children, equally is the same for adults, like you said. If you're a team member and you come in on a Monday morning, you've had a bit of a rubbish weekend, you've maybe not felt great or just things have gone wrong and you just feel like you just you're not good enough by coming into work and having your manager, your line manager, just say a simple good morning, how are you? Automatically they're seen, aren't they? And they're heard, they're listened to. Sometimes you just need to listen to that member of the team who just wants to have a bit of a rant and a bit of a moan about how rubbish their weekend's been. They might come to you for solutions and might come to you to problem solve and work on something together. But I suppose they will only do that when they feel psychologically safe. And it's not just because there'll be team members that don't want to have that greeting and be spoken to and kind of feel quite anxious about that. So might just want to come in and get their job done, clock in and kind of
Yeah.
fall under the radar. So I think it's important for them as well to be seen and heard in different ways. So it's that adaptation, isn't it? It's that
Yeah.
adaptation of your environment, of who you are as a leader, because we know leadership is complex and we know it requires lots of different cognitive thought processes in your brain on how to, as you say, with children, it's definitely not a one size fits all. And with making sure your team feel, included and have a sense of belonging, it's not a one size fits all, is it either, is it?
No, 100% no, it's not. And I feel like that is the beauty of early years as well, is that we are already, as practitioners and leaders, have the capability to adapt our activities, that we have a full child-centered approach, and that we can adapt our activities to meet the needs of the children individually. And like you said, because they're all, like you said, they're not one size fits all. They're all unique in their own ways, but us as adults are also unique as well. And we have to work out our strengths and our weaknesses, and knowing that everyone is different, but we all bring something unique to the table. Like we all learn something from each other. I think that's the importance part as well, is the fact that we, as human beings, we bring something so unique that we get to learn that skill, or that I don't think of it like that. I didn't think of it that way. I need your, like, so it's how we kind of collaborate with each other and connect with one another as well. And I think that beauty of that sense of connection that we have in an earlier setting with so many different people from different diverse
Yeah.
backgrounds, different experiences, come together as one and give those to the children as a learning experience as well.
Yeah, I think that connection is vital, isn't it, really? That connection and collaboration. And I think over the years as well, I've learned that and developed that. I've kind of moved away perhaps when I'm talking about the staffing team. So I'll say members of the team as opposed to members of staff, because again, it doesn't create a positive association, does it? And also potentially subliminally, those members of the team are thinking, oh, well, I'm just a staff member, I'm just the apprentice, I'm just the chef. But like you said, everyone has a unique aspect to bring, and whether that's a skill that they can bring, whether that's a piece of knowledge they can bring, or whether it's just a really positive, happy personality that they can bring to the team. We all have those members within our team that are the kind of includers, aren't they? Like the people that like to make sure everyone's included and everyone has a voice. You've got the people who are constantly kind of arranging things and making sure things are happening and things are doing, and you've got those people who kind of are working on those outcomes and those results. So you've got such a vast range of skills and knowledges and behaviors within an early years team that it's vital that that sense of belonging is embedded into your
Yeah.
culture, I suppose, and it isn't just a tokenistic gesture. Oh, we've said good morning to Ryan, so we've ticked our sense
No.
of belonging box.
Yeah.
But actually, that might be the only interaction you've ever had with your manager or line manager or director for the last 6 months. So really, does that make you feel included and part of something and part of a community, I suppose. That's what it comes down to. So in terms of like advice, and is there anything you can share really that if kind of managers or leaders or anyone, who works and leads people, how they can ensure that their teams feel psychologically safe in order to allow the children to feel psychologically safe, but also in terms of advice as a self-advice, what can they do to feel psychologically safe themselves? And it's obviously not a one size fits all, so it's not going to be a generic answer that everyone can do. But what are some of the go-tos or the must-haves you've learned over the years that have kind of allowed you to feel a lot more psychologically safe and part of something?
As believing in yourself, I think that's
Mm,
a huge thing that I didn't have for a while. I think I had a lot of self-doubt.
mm,
Didn't think I was good enough.
mm,
I felt like I had to fight for a
mm,
place in the sector.
mm,
Like I had to prove to myself, this is where I belong, this is where I fit in. And that was just within me, though. It wasn't the
mm,
outside. That wasn't
mm,
what was portrayed on the outside. That was more within me. Like I felt like I needed to prove and fight for a place, rightfully so, to sit at this table. And in theory, when talking to people, they were like, Ryan, this is great, this is good, this is, and it was always in the back of my mind, like, okay, it's good, it's great, okay, but what can I do better? How can I lift it to the next level? And that was kind of like the way I was throughout my career until like 2 years ago, where everything that I did, I did seek that validation from others. Every activity that I did, I needed someone to come and see, tell me that it was amazing. And like I said in my article, I had comments where like, if Ofsted were here, it would be outstanding. And that's great. But it just
mm,
didn't kind of touch where it needed to touch, because I was like, I didn't validate that myself. I didn't take that to the next level.
mm,
I
mm,
didn't celebrate those small wins that people talk about. And I wasn't proud of what I've already achieved. It was always about what was happening next. So instead of me being present within that moment, I was always thinking about the future. And I set my bar really, really high, to the point where I couldn't even achieve what
mm,
I believed to have
mm,
achieved. And
mm,
for years, I wasn't unhappy. I always felt like I wasn't working hard enough. But in fact, I was giving it 110% every single time, and I just wasn't feeling satisfied. It wasn't until I sat down and had a coaching session, and I kind of like reflected back
mm,
on everything that I've done, and it was a realization that hit. But I was like, actually, I'm really proud of what I've
yeah.
done, the journey that I've been on. Because I think I had a goal, but the goal wasn't about the end game. It wasn't about where I was going to end up. It was about the journey that I've been on, and I was able to kind of connect with my inner self, that inner child that we all have inside us,
Mm,
that comes
mm,
out when we're in our earliest settings and we're playing with the children. We've done a really good job, and the children were happy, the parents were happy. We got outstanding by Ofsted. Like all these things happened, and I just wasn't feeling the best. And I'm like, to most people, that's amazing. That is
yeah.
amazing. Now I sit there and realize I'm so proud of myself. I'm proud of
Mm,
the practitioner that I've become. I'm proud of how I've been able to, more importantly, I think self-validation. I think
mm,
I've sought validation for so long from people that actually the only person that I needed it from was me.
yeah.
And it kind of like all kind of once I said to myself, "You did well today, Ryan. Pat yourself on the back," like that type of thing. It kind of like, wow, that moment, that realization was
Mm,
like, oh my God, this is amazing. Look what I've done, look what I've achieved. And that would be like my advice for anyone that is struggling with that. Um, we all belong, and it's okay not to fit into those boxes.
mm,
Because create your own box, create your own space, um, and just be yourself. I think and that's what we kind of teach our children, is that it's okay to be themselves. But if we can't be ourselves,
Yeah.
then how can we expect the children to believe in that, like be themselves and things like that? So it's just like believing in us as practitioners and what we can do, the impact that we have, that it goes a long way. And like I said in the little quote, where I said, like, in the early years, voices are heard and stories are honored. Like, everyone has a voice and everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's share those stories. Let's talk about them. Let's, like I said, the early years, we don't just teach, we transform. We transform children. And I feel like that's a very powerful message and the power of what early years has. And I am very proud to be a part of it. And I can't think of anything. I'm so glad I went into that reception class.
Yeah, absolutely.
I am very glad that I did and never looked back since.
Yeah, and I think that's such a powerful note to end on, which is we don't just teach, we transform, not just for children, but for adults. And I know there's lots more in your article that we haven't really touched on around kind of really fostering that sense of community and connection through sites such as LinkedIn and the positives that that's brought. And obviously, you know, everyone can read your article and reach out to you if they want to kind of learn more about that. But I think we'll end it on there because I think that's such a poignant but powerful element to end on. And you know, I I've seen firsthand, you know, even in the time that I've known you, the progress and the achievement that you've made. And whilst it's great when people reach out and say well done and congratulations and we're really proud of you, I think you're now at a point in your career, but in your life as well, where you have already patted yourself, like you said, on the back yourself before anyone else has. And I think that's what we all have to strive to get to, really, that point of inner self-validation as opposed to that extrinsic external validation. It's nice and it's important that we get that now and again to give us a little hit of dopamine and all of the feel-good hormones we have in our bodies, but actually just feeling like you belong and you're safe and you're heard through yourself as much as everyone else is really important. So thank you, Ryan, for being part of the podcast. And thank you to all of those who are listening and watching. Our listeners, as I said, can find Ryan's article on the Voice of Early Childhood website, and the link will be in the episode description. And for more episodes and articles in this series, please see our Men in Early Childhood page, and the link again will be in the episode description. Once again, thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.